um, work with and support and amplify businesses to help embed responsible business activities. And that's sort of looking at the people piece, how you work with and enable the best team of people, which is what we're looking at towards today, how you support your local communities, and also how you work with the planet as well. So today we've got a brilliant session by Richard. Richard is a creative brand consultant and is going to talk to us about introversion in the workplace. So I'll hand over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Louise. And yeah, thank you all for joining. What is one of my favorite topics as I would say, a newly discovered introvert. Sophie, if we can move to the first slide, please. What I would like from you all, I don't know if I can actually see here, but what I normally do, so if this is in person, I'll usually say, raise your hands if you think you're an introvert. And it's just so that I can gauge a sense of who's in the room. But if there is a chat function, you can just put yes. And if you think you're an extrovert, you can put no. Or if you think you're an ambivert, which is that sweet spot in the middle, you can pop maybe. But yes, introversion. So I remember when I was in school and at the end of a school day, my school friends at the time would knock on my front door. And my dad would always go to the door back then. I guess most parents, I don't know. And they would be like, oh, Mr. Etienne, could Richard come out to play? And I'd be hiding in the back, at the back, slightly adjacent to the door, signaling no, to my father, because my whole thing was, I just spent 6 hours with you. Like, why would I want to spend more time with you? And I'm going to see you again tomorrow. And I was made to feel there was something wrong with me. And actually, it was only until in my much later life that I read a book from author Susan Cain called Quiet. Some of you may have heard that, which actually spoke of this whole tribe, which was, almost 50% of the global population, called introverts. And that literally was an awakening, almost a reintroduction to myself. So I hope that this session gives you a piece of that by the end of it. Now, what does make someone an introvert? The general consensus is most people believe introverts are quiet, introspective, private. Most people also believe that extroverts are, exclusively friendly and outgoing. Now, while some of that may have truth, it's not the full meaning. Next slide, please, Sophie. So actually, the real meaning has nothing to do with social skills, but simply how a person gains or drains energy. So gains or drains energy, like that will be in your mind by the end of the session. And psychologist Carl Jung, who actually coined the phrase introvert, extrovert, once said that there's no such thing as a pure introvert or extrovert. And actually, such a person will be found in a lunatic asylum. So actually, the best way to look at the two personality types is like a sliding scale that is tailored for different situations. So in your career, in your life journey, even, you can see how, I see chat is coming up. This is good. If you're a parent, for example, you may have to lean a bit more into your extroversion to be a bit more playful and outgoing with the children. If you are moving up the career ladder, you may find yourself having to lead teams or give public statements, for example. So, those are moments where you will have to slide a little bit into your INs, slide into your INs. Yeah, right now I'm sliding into my extroversion just to give you this talk. So what I would like to do actually is test the waters again, see who's in the room. Next slide, please, Sophie. And what I would like to do is just, there are a number of statements that will be on this screen. There we go. I can see all the chats coming in. It's nice to see a few ambiverts in the room as well, introverts there. Where are my extroverts? So 6 statements here. So number 1, do you think carefully before speaking or acting? Do you prefer to express your feelings in writing rather than talking? Or do you have a few deep, selected, close relationships? Do you dislike small talk? That's something that I've struggled with. In fact, our late Queen was great at that. Enjoying self-reflection and introspection, and having different public and private personas. So if you answered yes to all or most of these statements, you are likely an introvert. And actually a quick line on small talk, and I'm going to do the biggest name drop, and I'm so sorry. But I used to be the Prime Minister, Theresa May's videographer. And so that meant a lot of brilliant trips, a few trips to Buckingham Palace. And one thing I learned about small talk with the royal family is they ask the what and not the how. So, for example, every Monday you start work, what's the very first question your peers will ask you? How was your weekend, right? And usually the response can be quite monosyllabic or like, quite short. Yeah, it was all right. But imagine if you were stuck in a lift or you were stuck in the middle of an aisle and you couldn't leave and you had, to engage in some small talk. The best thing is to ask the what. So here we go. Instead of how was your weekend, you could ask, what was the highlight of your weekend? And then that individual's like, well, did a spot of gardening, whatever. Oh, wow. What did you plant? Oh, in fact, I didn't really plant. I actually took stuff out because, they all died, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh my gosh, what encouraged you to start gardening? And then, you don't say much. They're saying everything. And by the time they leave the conversation, they think you're amazing. So ask the what, not the how. Next slide, please. And yes, and then there's that sweet spot in the middle called ambiversion, which is that balanced personality with introvert and extrovert traits. And I would definitely say that at work, most of us are ambiverts. That's where we have to, again, adjust for different situations. And there's a quote actually on the next slide, please, Sophie, that from actor Emma Watson, who says, if you're anything other than an extrovert, you're made to think there's something wrong with you. Something wrong with you. How many of you can relate to that? And Nikki, I am so with you with the school run play date small talk, because you are literally thrusted in and amongst people who you wouldn't actually have selected to be your friends. They're your children's friends, parents. Like, oh my God. But you know what? They will think you're amazing if you practice that what and not how tactic. So yeah, anything other than an extrovert. And it made me think of that old line, the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. And that starts in school. So for example, if you raise your hand in class, you're rewarded for being an active participant. If you give, reports in front of the class effortlessly, again, you get a gold star. Or if you play in a group during lunch break, you're seen as having better social skills than a child who engages in solitary play. And unfortunately, this attitude has wormed its way into our place of work. And most workplace cultures now tend to reward outspokenness and dynamism in their employees. And in fact, those are the words that I've seen in job adverts, resulting in introverts. I believe this has resulted in introverts making up only 2% of UK senior executives, 2%, even though a third of Britons identify as introverts. So we're gonna wake up the brains a little bit. Let's engage in a poll. So the next slide, you will see 10 individuals, both present and past, and 5 of them have identified themselves as introverts. So what I would like you to do is we're going to launch a poll, and I would like you to select the 5 people you believe are introverts or were introverts. So 5 introverts. Who are the 5 introverts on this? For those who are unable to see the screen, number 1 is Steve Jobs, 2, Lady Gaga, 3, Elton John, 4, Muhammad Ali, 5, Margaret Thatcher, 6, Joe Wicks, 7, Meryl Streep, 8, Nelson Mandela, 9 Beyonce, 10 Michelle Obama. What 5 are introverts? Now I like to switch up the names each time I give this presentation. And in the 5 years or so I've been doing these type of polls, no one has got all 5. So let's see. Maybe today's the day. I believe in you, heart of the city. I believe in you. But yeah, why is quieter always perceived as a negative thing? I think a lot of that is to do. That's a great question, by the way, Joanna. A lot of it is to do with media perception of what a great leader looks like, or a person of influence. So the people that seem to make the television programs, you know, the news and so forth, are, you know, the gregarious, the Elon Musks, and obviously Boris Johnson was prime minister, but you know, he got a lot of airtime about his personality rather than actually scrutinizing what he was actually there to do. And so the quieter people just seem to be overlooked. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm ready for the result. I'd like to see who you selected as your 5 introverts. Okay. Sophie, do we have a result? I'm going to end the poll now. Oh, okay. So I see lots for Nelson Mandela and Steve Jobs. Muhammad Ali and Maggie was okay. All right, here we go. We will now reveal the 5 introverts. Here are your 5. Did anybody get all 5? Please put in the chat. I will personally buy you something. I just feel like, you know, it's time. But yeah, these are your 5 introverts, and your 5 extroverts are on the next slide. Yes, Michael, Elton John. There was a film recently, like a biopic movie, and he mentioned, the actor mentioned that introversion piece in the movie. Actually, if you've seen it, I totally forgot what it's called. I'm so sorry, but I heard it was a good movie. Right. So why is any of this relevant? So yeah, next slide, please. Why is any of this relevant? Well, no one looks like an introvert, number one, right? It's a personality trait, and we tailor it to any given situation. Also, introverts don't like being, oh, thank you for taking part, by the way. Introverts don't like being the center of attention, you know, promoting themselves really, or standing out in a crowd. These celebs, these personalities from the previous poll, you know, they were thrust into the limelight and they needed to unlearn. And this is something I'll just talk about in a moment. And finally, personal branding is invaluable. And I think it's important that we all, you know, regardless of whether we're comfortable in our role or we're looking for a new role, need to understand that self-promotion, you know, marketing of oneself isn't optional. It's not. If you want to be a leader in your field, or if you want to land your dream job, if you want to get a promotion or be put forward for some sort of project or something that advances your career, you will need to tell people who you are and why you're important, why your talents are special. And you may think, oh, but Richard, you know, how can I have a brand if I hate drawing attention to myself? Well, I'll tell you something. You have a brand. You have a brand, whether you like it or not. Simply Google yourself and see what comes up. And actually, a quick tip on Googling yourself or using any search engine is to use incognito or private mode, because then you get to remove all the caches or cookies from your browser, and you actually get to see you as the world does. So that's really important in case, you know, you want to check what images are out there of you, and, you know, what websites come up when your name is searched. So yeah, please keep your shop window clean. But in order to do all of that, we do need to unlearn what is untrue. And futurist and philosopher Alvin Toffler said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Learn, unlearn, relearn. So you've learned a whole bunch of things from your education, adult education, but we'll need to unlearn some of these things. I read somewhere recently actually that adult education experts estimate that up to 40% of what tertiary students are learning will be obsolete a decade from now when they enter the workforce. Just think about it, right? 10 jobs that did not exist 10 years ago. You have app developers, social media managers, Pilates instructors. Change happens at lightning speed. So, think about 5 years from now. The pandemic has brought forth a whole new slew of roles in different industries that weren't really supposed to kick in until much later, according to experts. So because of this, we must be proactive when it comes to your own professional development in order to stay relevant. Taking courses, and you've taken this one, for example, a nice little lunch and learn. You're learning, you're continually unlearning what's untrue and relearning. It's great for growth. So with a few minutes to go, what we'll do is we'll look at two areas where introversion in the workplace can thrive. So first we'll look at meetings, and second is speech, or choice of words, etc. And I've grouped this under how to be heard as an introvert. So handling meetings. Guess if I could say 1/3, 2/3, or 3/4, like how much we spend a week in meetings. It's ridiculous. So I read recently that it was 2/3 of our work week average employee spends in meetings, up from a pre-pandemic level of 1/3, which is likely down to another pandemic called presenteeism. And while regrettably time-consuming, meetings are the best opportunity to showcase your personal brand. However, introverts, we hesitate to speak up sometimes, or we may regress from giving feedback to a colleague, for fear of confrontation, or perfectionism. How many of you want to have all of the details before speaking? How can we overcome this? Well, 7 ways we will look through. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the first one is never underestimating the value of your ideas. And what do I mean by that? You are there for a reason. You are there for a reason, just like every other person around that virtual or physical table. If your ideas were not valued, you would not have been invited. So please do not underestimate the value of your ideas. Secondly, the sooner you contribute, the less time you have to generate self-doubt. So when I enter a meeting, I'm very quick to introduce myself because it just literally helps me to speak. It gets those early butterflies or those nerves out. And you can do the whole English, ask about the weather, whatever, but just something. And if you don't have an opportunity to do that, it means the third point, which is, picking one item on the agenda to prepare and actually have something to say very early, if possible. And for those who are meeting chairs, this means please get your agendas out when you're sending meeting invites as soon as possible, if you want the best out of your introverts. On the fourth point, we it's not a thing, probing questions. Ask probing questions. So really probing deeply into someone's comment in order to feel like an engaged, active participant. I think that's very important. However, number 5, we talk about this confrontation piece. It's not really confrontation. Disagreements are inevitable. We're having a debate, but just remember that they're useful in coming to a common solution. That's why we're all here. And then with the 6th point, it's really important to be aware of this because it's very common to defer to someone, a person in authority. Instead, showcase your knowledge and your expertise. Basically, I should just say for number 6, look at number 1. Yeah, just remember, your You have a right to be there like everyone else. You are supposed to be there. Never underestimate your value. And then finally, virtual meetings. I mean, I could do a whole piece on virtual meetings, but I wrote a blog for The Guardian at the end of the first year of the pandemic lockdown, season 1 and 2. And one of the tips I gave was to practice name calling. And what I meant by that was using a person's name to interject to prevent yourself from apologizing. So how many of us have done the sorry, sorry, you know, it's just not effective. And by the time you've actually been given the floor, it can feel so, you know, demoralizing. Actually, Dale Carnegie said a person's name is a sweeter sound to them. So actually just saying, it's like, thank you, Chris, for that. I really appreciated that point. What I'd just like to add, for some bizarre reason, and I've been doing this now ever since then, it just seems to work. So practice it. Practice name calling for a week and see what happens. So that was meetings. And we will skip this just for timing, but it is important to, in the chat, if you can, just kind of give examples of when you've overcome a reluctance to speak up in meetings, just so we can do some peer-to-peer learning. But now one of my favorite pieces, 7 words or phrases to remove from your professional vocabulary. I will never tell you what not to say outside of the office. So before we show the first one, please pop in the chat certain words or phrases that you yourself find, or that you would like to stop saying, or you just find there's a bit of a barrier to actually showing confidence in your speech. Yes, I see sorry. Yeah, we're very apologetic, aren't we? Might be possible, wondered, ums and ahs. Yes, I can get to that as well. Do you mind? Okay, all right. I'm loving these. Keep them coming as we go through this. So the first one is the word just. Now, emails. How many of us, when we write our emails, kick off with that word? You know, just checking in to see if you've got that blah, blah, blah. I've just wondered if I could blah, blah, blah. It sounds a bit like an apology. So those sorries that I saw in the chat earlier, and it kind of links to a fear of rejection. I would say just delete it. Delete that word just and see what happens. Next word is this is a phrase. I'm no expert. You know, so I'm no expert, but now I understand we say it so to avoid coming across as pushy or arrogant, but it can negate credibility. And actually, it's easier, it's probably more effective rather, to talk about what you are an expert in. So I'm an expert in comms. So someone may ask me a policy question, but I may say, well, look, within comms, you know, we have 3 clear approaches. You know, what do we want people to think, feel, or do? So with your policy, I would consider having a think about that principled approach to make sure that it's the best for your audience, blah, 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 blah. Whatever the thing is, you could bring it back to where you are an expert, or say that you will find an expert for them. So you still become of value. Next one is can't. So Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So instead use words like, I choose not to, I prefer not to, or I won't. You know, take a bit of ownership, because you can do anything you want. Like you can literally fly, but you just choose not to do the training. It's fine. Next one. What? Oh, honestly. So I've heard this one a lot, and you may have heard this also in job interviews, for example, or what's that term people say now? They say a lot. Well, to tell you the truth, or something like that, or I'm not going to lie. It's like, well, why would you? Of course you're not going to lie. Or if you're telling me the truth now, what were you saying before? So usually that's linked with nerves or not really getting a grip of what you want to say. So just pause, I think, is probably my advice for that one. To be honest, yeah, another one. Thank you, Natalia. What if we tried? What if we tried? Now, this one, I understand it's collaborative, it's a group thing. You know, what if we tried this thing? But again, you want to be seen as confident. You want to be seen as someone in your own, standing in your own truth. So you'd be taken more seriously if you used it as a statement and not a question. I think we should move this webinar to a different time because X, Y, and Z. Then you ask, what do you think? I believe we should stop investing in blah, 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 because blah, blah, blah. That's the best way to use that. I think we have two more. One, two, three. Thing. This is a valueless word and should be replaced with something more descriptive and meaningful. For example, instead of saying, how are things going with our project? A question that's proposed or positioned as, can you share an update on how our project timeline is advancing or progressing? Is much clearer and will likely give you the answer that you're looking for. It saves that back and forth. You know, how are things going? They're going okay. Yeah, I was talking about that thing. What thing? Anyway, am I making sense? Great thing, good question after that one. Well, until you said that, you were. And it actually speaks to self-doubt. And I would actually instead use, you know, did that answer your question? Or I look forward to hearing your feedback. Am I making sense? It doesn't really work. It makes people doubt you because you're doubting yourself. And actually, the inverse of that is it can come across as patronizing if used in the wrong context as well. So just really be mindful about that. Again, these are all things. I'm not saying, you know, if you say any of these words, hellfire is going to break loose. It's just, as someone who works in communications, and we all can attest to the fact that words have power, it's important that your choice of words are very considered to show confidence in yourself. So I hope those were helpful. And because of timing, I won't be able to go through, I won't go through this management piece, but I will just say, and in fact, the slides will be shared afterwards as well. So 2 slides from here, there was a list of actions that I suggest or invite both introverts and extroverts to consider. Some of them we mentioned before, like sending the meeting agenda in advance, but also it extends to requesting written feedback from our introverts rather than just kind of calling them out of the blue or just hovering over their shoulder at a desk. Oh, just thinking about this thing, tell me. And you know, it's probably not the best. So yeah, thank you. I want to just do a quick recap. So there we go. So yeah, thank you. So we looked at meetings being the best opportunities to showcase your personal brands. Makes you plan ahead. Makes you remember you have a right to be there like everyone else. Trust your instincts as well in terms of, you know, how you present your information. You know, we are deep thinkers. Be considered in your speech. And because of that, we looked at 7 words and phrases to remove. And I think just one learned line for managers, you know, do not assume, you know, people in your team are either introversion or extroversion. Do your research. Do your research on them. There are wonderful free personality tools out there online that you can use to do that. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that. I've seemed to have lost my Zoom. There you are. What's on the next slide, actually, Sophie, please? Oh, right, quick. So very quickly, I just wanted to do a quick plug for Black Introvert Week, which happens on the last week of Black History Month, October. And I basically just want to invite you all to join the main event that happens on the Thursday. It's a panel event which features a smorgasbord of award-winning authors, career coaches, and TV personalities. And we will be discussing the intersection of race and personality in the workplace. You know, how can we redefine what it means to be Black and introvert in an extroverted, favored environment? And practical tips on how to thrive in the workplace, very similar to this, and how to empower others around you to do similar. So Thursday, 27th of October, you can search on Eventbrite. I wish I put the link somewhere. I'll probably put in the chat to attend. It's free. So thank you. Next slide has my details. I have an introvert survival guidebook. I want you to do this when you log off afterwards. Download the book, pick 3 things that you will practice for the rest of the month. And then you email me back, message me, whatever, and say, hey, Rich, it really worked. Or Rich, it sucked. Here's some feedback. It would be just wonderful either way. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. And you kept beautifully to time, so really well done. As I said, if anyone has any comments, ideas, thoughts, questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We will come to them. I have a couple here just to test out with you, Richard. I myself am an introvert, but having done multiple quizzes, I always seem to kind of fall right in the middle, but I certainly think of myself as an introvert. And trying to take your tip around that what question and not how, which is surprisingly hard. I'm just wondering, it was interesting when right at the start, when we were looking at who was introvert or identified as introvert or extrovert or ambivert at the beginning. And I'm just kind of, I suppose most people in the room seem to be sort of on the ambivert or introvert side. And I just wonder if you've got any ideas about what we can do to let other people know, especially people we work with, about the needs that we might have as an introvert, as opposed to accommodating extroverts all the time.
Thank you, Louise. And this is a great question. And it's actually one of the main purposes of Black Introvert Week. And it's not, this part actually isn't race specific, but it's getting personality diversity into training in the workplace. Part of the onboarding process, as part of one-to-ones. One thing I encourage my line manager to do, and she does it now, and any line manager I've ever had, is, part of my personal development plan or part of my, one-to-ones, whether it's a monthly catch-up, is to talk about that piece, get the team to do a personality diversity test the moment, like in the first week or when they've joined, and talk about it more openly in terms of, what your needs, what your wants are as an introvert, extrovert, ambivert. It's just about making it part of the general conversation. Because it did come up the conversation chain once we went into lockdown the first time. And, people were saying, oh my God, I'm really struggling here as an extrovert, or wow, I'm really thriving as an introvert. And then suddenly the conversation about why these things are true came to the fore. So there are a whole plethora of resources and information online in terms of introversion, but not so much about extroversion. So again, as I said, this is one of the things that the organization is trying to do, and we want to inform policy at the very highest level. But until then, I think it's about having those one-to-one conversations with line managers about your own personality type, making it a local conversation. Hopefully that will expand to the wider organizations.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of take from that. So first of all, awareness, and getting that awareness for yourself and for others, and then having those conversations and having safe spaces for those conversations. What I loved as well is when you were talking about meetings, be that virtual meetings or in-person meetings, and how do you create spaces for people to contribute? So be that prior to the meeting by sending out the agenda in advance, or I don't know, previous workplaces we've used post-it notes for quite a few things, and sort of said, ask everyone to put their ideas down on post-it notes before they say them, and then stick them up somewhere. And those kind of little tips and tricks to enable people to have thinking time, as well as sort of wanting to stick their hand up in the air like we did at school, which is what you sort of noted. I think the only other sort of question, I don't think we've got any more questions coming through on the chat, but just one other thing is just about, I suppose, for the introverts in the room, but just about what can you do to manage your energy in the workplace, if you've got any tips or tricks on that.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So for example, I always block out lunch as a meeting, reoccurring invite on my calendars. And, so hopefully no one puts a meeting in there. If you use Outlook, they have this really great feature called Focus as well. So it automatically just blocks nice little 15-minute slots across your week to give you, again, that ring-fenced kind of time for yourself. Also, outside of work, sort of. And so during your lunch, do you go for a walk? Do you do something that actually energizes you, whether it is to listen to some music, have a dance, nap? I don't know. But we have to take it on ourselves, as well, in terms of a personal responsibility for re-energizing ourselves in whatever way that is. Mine is having a peppermint tea and just reading the Week magazine while listening to something. It could be anything for anyone, but it's definitely, as a practical tip, block out time as if they were meetings in your schedule, in your calendar, to prevent people infiltrating your personal space.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Richard. And thanks, Joanna, for hopping the chat about the lunchtime walk making a difference. I think one of the things with COVID, at least that I found, and I don't know if others in the room did, is that we sort of took on a lot of practices and tried things out, when you could get out for your bit of daily exercise, or walking away from the laptop, or doing whatever it is. And it was quite meaningful and kind of purposeful, whereas now coming back into kind of what we call normality, I suppose, it's kind of harder to keep those habits alive and up, and especially as an introvert, when you're kind of thrust back into a very busy environment, it can be quite overwhelming. So that gentle reminder to keep going with those kind of habits that give you energy and re-energize you is really helpful. Thank you, Richard.
That's okay. And Louise, just one quick one actually about energy, and it was an analogy I heard many moons ago, and it's about coins. So an introvert wakes up in the morning with 5 gold coins, and every social interaction they have to give a coin away. So by the end of the day, they are spent, and that's when they need to recharge. An extrovert wakes up with no coins, and every social interaction they gain a coin. So by the end of the day, they are rich in energy. And so it's really important, I guess, both sides of the spectrum, to kind of just be mindful of that, protect your coins, or be as careful or as generous as you wish to be. But just, it's more about awareness, as we mentioned earlier.
Brilliant, Richard. That was a fantastic anecdote. Thank you so much for ending on. Just a quick comment here to share from Natalie before we finish. Natalia, sorry. So it'd be good to also talk about introvert not by choice, but by coming from a different cultural background and language.
Indeed. So I mean, I can only speak from my culture. So I'm Caribbean, and one thing that as children, our parents were very much, children should be seen and not heard, and it's always about deferring to those in authority. So in school, I was naturally quiet. In the workplace, it's boss rules, and never speak up, never stand outside of your station. And so whether that reinforced introversion for me personally, there's a strong argument for that. And I know there are other cultures out there with similar, if not adjacent type experiences. So, we are a global community, and there are so many intersectional layers and nuances to consider. But what I would definitely invite everyone to do, and it's that word, is just invite our peers, our friends, our colleagues to share their story so that we can understand them better. And yeah, we can only grow stronger as a result.
Brilliant. Richard, thank you so much. Really appreciate you had such interesting insights, and it was incredibly helpful. And I think this is something that is so easy to kind of, we think about so many different ideas when it comes to responsible business, but how we treat one another is so integral to everything else that we then do in the workplace. So thank you so much.
And thank you. And thank you everyone for your questions and for attending. I really appreciate it.
I'm just going to close the webinar very quickly now, just to give everyone some highlights, some additional resources. As I said, Heart of the City, or a responsible business charity. We are running future free online events. You can see on the screen here, we've got something on offsetting communicating to avoid greenwashing. So if you're thinking about net zero and your carbon emissions, that'd be really helpful. And also thinking about accessibility and inclusion in the workplace. So we will send you links to those if you're interested after today. If also you aren't already sort of working with us and part of our community, but you were interested to be, we offer 2 programs. We have a Foundations for a Responsible Business program, which looks at that whole piece, people, place, and planet. And we have a huge amount of resources and live events and expertise to share with you. If your business is in particular London boroughs, being Southwark, Islington, Hackney, Lambeth, or Camden, your business is eligible for a free place on that program. And also the Climate for SMEs, if you're thinking about your net zero journey, if you are working towards reducing your carbon footprint and you need a bit of support, we have, first of all, a completely free climate action toolkit, which does a step-by-step guide on how, as a business, you can kind of own that process and work your way towards a net zero plan with demonstrable, measurable impact. And we also have a free course available for SMEs that are based in the City of London, the Square Mile, or if you operate there as well. And we'll send you links to both of those after the session. And that quickly wraps up now, just before 1:15. Just thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with us. We really appreciate it. I hope you found it helpful, and we'll follow up. It will be possibly at the beginning of next week with all of the links and resources, including a recording of the session. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a good rest of day. Thank you.